want to ask the councillors if they have access to agenda on their devices. Everybody's got access to devices? Right, really? Yeah. One further point, I see Terry here from press, so he will be taking pictures as we proceed. So as we go on to the agenda, apologies for absence. Charlotte.
Thank you, Leader. No apologies were received for today's Cabinet meeting.
Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members? No declaration of interest. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on 16th of October 2023. Are the minutes agreed as a true and accurate record? That was the previous administration. Thank you, John. Do I need to take?
I'll sign them at the end.
Yeah, okay. No proposal? No, okay. Thank you. Item 4, petitions to Cabinet. Are there any petitions to be presented to Cabinet? No petitions. It's nice and straightforward. So item 5, we come on to the main agenda points. Final report of the Cycling and Walking Task and Finish Group, Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, LCWIP, pages 7 to 34, agenda item 5. I see Councillor LC, Cabinet Member, you would like to present that.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to pass on my thanks to the Task and Finish Group for all the hard work they have done to produce this comprehensive report on the local cycling, walking and infrastructure plan. There are several great initiatives included within the report and some areas that I feel require further consideration, which I will discuss once the group have had the opportunity to present their presentation. I will commit that I will work with officers to provide a comprehensive, fully comprehensive formal written response to Scrutiny Committee on all of the proposals that have been put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alty. Do we have any questions on that, members?
Councillor Skipstead, as the chair of the group, would like to speak.
Yeah. Councillor Skipstead, as a chair of the group, you would like to speak? No.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll present the report and then Lewis will give some more detail afterwards. So the vision behind this Task and Finish group was to enable Peterborough to become a city where cycling and walking is a priority and people can use these modes of active transport to where they need to be safely and efficiently. It's a big challenge in our city because we've got many narrow roads and lots of traffic, but we're aiming to be carbon zero by 2030, so increasing numbers of cyclists and walkers must be part of this strategy and something we aspire to. As well as this, the government target is to double the amount of cyclists by 2025. So in Peterborough, we're actually going the wrong way. It's imperative we make cycling and walking a better and more attractive than is currently the case. I became the chair of this Task and Finish group a year ago, and we've spent quite a lot of time within the cross-party group and members of the Cycle Forum looking at the existing LC whip and the details of the routes outlined to make improvements. There are many examples of how many roads in this city do not comply with the recommendations of the cycling infrastructure design standards, LTN 120, for the infrastructure needed to build safe cycle routes. So we have a long way to go. This is often because the cycle paths are too narrow or too close to traffic. Of the main findings and discussions, one of the key prioritisations of the group was that there was a lack of connectivity through the city centre. Most routes identified start or finish at the city centre, but there's no route through the centre. As such, a city centre circular route was identified and should be included in this LC whip. And all of this went to scrutiny on 28th of February. Further proposals would be developed to enable north-south cycle journeys, including crossing Town Bridge and along Bridge Street. I think I will pass on to Lewis Banks to continue to give more detail about the cycle routes. As a group, we concluded with our report to the Scrutiny Committee on 28th of February, and the recommendations were approved on that day. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skipstead. I think that covers off, a really good overview in terms of the process that's been followed. One thing I would just add in is that obviously the paper generally deals with the LC WIP, which is focused on the urban area. So obviously a lot of the recommendations and the detail within the report are just covering the urban area of Peterborough. But one of the recommendations does say that we do want to create a rural cycle strategy, and that's something that we're looking to do next year, because we recognise the importance of our rural areas and making sure that they have safe walking and cycling routes as well. And obviously we'll be presenting further details to Cabinet colleagues and councillors as well next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. Thank you, Heather. Councillor Hillard, I take it you have a question?
Yes, I do, Leader. Yes, I do, Leader. Thank you. Lewis, probably, who I've known for many years. Last weekend, I actually uncovered a 2001 green wheel map. It was beautifully produced. Fold-out map that could fit on the front of a bike, as well as in the glove box of a car if you're going to the green wheel at any point. Can you just tell me, does that green wheel exist in the same form as it did 22 years ago? And if it does, how is it being used today? Thank you. Thank you, Leader.
Yes, yeah, it definitely still does exist, and we were grateful that we managed to receive some funding from the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority last year and this year to actually make some substantial upgrades to key sections of it. So I think it is still well used and it is still well liked. I think around Peterborough, a lot of people like the green wheel, and it's quite a pride of the city really to have that level of infrastructure. And I think really interesting is how the LC WIP and the rural cycle strategy can build upon the green wheel, make those connections better and make those improvements where they're needed. So yeah, I think that will be a key focus of ours next year, looking at the rural areas, is to, we've got a great green wheel piece of infrastructure. What more do we need, though, to make cycling better?
Thank you, Lewis. Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much, Leader. Question really to Councillor Skipstead, or of course Lewis. I actually came to the first meeting of this, the forum that the task and finish, and I brought up something then, and I'm not sure if I've got the answer to it yet. The fact that while we continue to grow the cycleways, the footpath structure, what account has been made for how we maintain these? Because we've already got a very poor, in areas, cycleway system that needs upgrading. So I know it's a balancing act, but I'm wondering on your views on, there's no, do we just keep getting bigger, or do we start to look after the stock we've got? Thank you.
Yeah, maintenance is, it is a real challenge, isn't it? Not just for ourselves, but obviously for all local authorities throughout the country. So obviously what we have to do is obviously prioritise where, where there are issues and where that funding is needed. I don't think there's any kind of quick answers to that at all. But what I would say obviously is that, the areas are inspected regularly, and that, if people come across any areas on our cycleways, footways, where maintenance is needed, do get in touch with us, and obviously we can make sure they're inspected and, appropriate maintenance plans are put in place to make those routes better.
Thank you, Lewis. Councillor Sanford, I understand as a mayor you would like to speak on this if there's no further questions.
Yes, I'd like to speak primarily on this as a member of the group, so just to add a few comments. I absolutely endorse what Councillor Skipstead said and what Lewis has said. I think I'd just like the Cabinet to recognise the significance of what is being put forward here. This is going to be the major cycling and walking plan for the council, and the thing I particularly like about it is that it talks about a cycling and walking first principle. Now that is entirely in line with the priorities of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough local transport plan, which has a transport hierarchy which says that we need to put cyclists pedestrians first in our consideration of transport. So I think this plan has been drawn up using objective criteria, and it actually says which the priority walking and cycling routes ought to be. I think it's one of the reasons that we require this plan. Well, there's two reasons really. The first one is that central government require us to have a plan, and it's used in order to decide how much cycling funding the combined authority in Peterborough will receive. But the other reason that it's important is the fact that Peterborough, I think we have, as far as England is concerned, we've got one of the largest networks of cycle routes in the country. But there was a statistic that was quoted by Sustrans, which said that only 6% of people in Peterborough actually cycle on a regular basis, which is not as high as Fenland and it's not as high as Huntingdonshire. And the Councillor Skipstead mentioned that one of the problems is the cycle network doesn't connect up. So one of the purposes of this is to join it up. Just finally, I just want to point out a contradiction in the report. There's a contradiction between recommendation 8 and recommendation 12. Recommendation 12 says that the task and finish group should be wound up. One of the recommendations of the group was that the group should continue, at least for the purpose of having a look at the results of the consultation, and also to take forward the idea of developing a rural strategy. So I hope you would agree recommendation 8 in preference to recommendation 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Councillor Elsey.
Thank you, Leader. I've listened with interest to what Councillor Sanford's just said, and I agree with most of it, if I'm honest. I have a couple of issues, and I'm not suggesting that I've already predetermined an opinion, because obviously people will forgive us. We've only been in these seats for a week or so, so we're kind of picking up at pace as we go. I understand the hierarchy. So the hierarchy is for cyclists and pedestrians to have priority. I would then link that back to creating accessible cycling down Bridge Street and say that those two groups would then be in competition with each other, especially when we're considering extending the market, which I believe is one of the other things that we've inherited that we need to look at. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm saying have these, specifically with those two groups at the top of the hierarchy. I don't understand how it works, because when I walk along Bridge Street, which I do on a fairly regular basis, not least when I'm going to Peterborough United, it's chaos because there are already people cycling, and the near misses that you see because people don't do it considerately. Now I know that's a generalisation, and there are lots of people who do cycle very considerately, but there are those who don't. How do we work the hierarchy with those two groups when there's a limited space and a compacted number of both? To me, it seems like there's going to be an issue there. Now, I completely agree that we need to connect the south and the north of the city for safe cycling and for safe pedestrian. I'm not convinced that Bridge Street is the answer. I'm happy to be convinced why, and I'm happy to do that offline with the group now that obviously it's within my portfolio. But I can't see how those two groups can be put at the top of the hierarchy, because one is going to be compromised by the other, unquestionably. And the other thing that I would like to look at, and again I have no predetermined opinion, would be the reintroduction of a cycle lane across Crescent Bridge. Now, I understand the benefits of having a cycle lane across Crescent Bridge, and I understand the hierarchy, but whether you like the car or you don't, you have to accept the knock-on effect. And when the cycle lane was there before, it was at a time that we were in lockdown. So the vehicle movements and the cycle movements were far reduced. So I don't subscribe to the group that say it wasn't used, so we got rid of it. I don't subscribe to that because we were in a lockdown. So we never saw the true numbers of people who potentially would use it as a cycle lane. But equally, they weren't competing with the amount of traffic that comes over Crescent Bridge on a daily basis now. And I know that with the advancement of the station quarter, that potentially a lot of that traffic may divert, but that's based on the station quarter being built and a car park being on the Midland roadside, so that a lot of the traffic going over the bridge doesn't necessarily need to do. But where we are here and now is that the traffic movements are significant along there, and to reduce the width of that for traffic movements will have an impact. And we then have to look at, as a collective, the impact that that has on the whole of Peterborough. If people are struggling to get to work on time, if goods can't be provided at certain places at certain times, if people are missing their trains because they've had no choice but to commute in and are looking to park to be able to go and catch a train. So I'm not saying I'm against, I just don't understand how it would work, and I don't think that we've been party to having, in fairness on both sides, up-to-date data enough to say our anticipation is this number of people will cycle across if there's a dedicated cycle route there, and this is the number of car movements that are currently going across there. How will that be impacted, and will the introduction of a cycle lane across there reduce the number of car movements, i.e. are the people in those cars people who are likely to use the cycle lane? And if they're not, and it's not going to have an impact, what impact does that have going forward? So, like I say, I'm not adverse, and I haven't got a predetermined opinion, but I would like the time to be able to look more thoroughly at those two particular issues, because I'm not convinced how they're necessarily going to work. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Elsie. So coming back to Councillor Skipstead, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the Bridge Street question, we spent a lot of time talking about that in the group. There are several cities and in several countries where this happens, where there's cycling and walking in the same place. I've even been to Brighton earlier this year, where they have, on the seafront, they have people walking, people cycling next to it. Obviously, it needs to be carefully routed with lines and demarked. The moment it isn't, so therefore it would be dangerous if people just randomly cycling up Bridge Street. You couldn't have that. But I think there's a lot more that needs to be worked out with that. It's just the question of, we got this issue of people having to get off and on their bicycles coming from south to north, north to south, and there is no direct route. How that would actually pan out in detail, I don't think we've worked out the finer details, but I think the concept happens in major cities across Europe, and I think it's possible, but we obviously need someone who knows how to make those plans in more detail to look at them. Crescent Bridge, I think it's sort of this idea of chicken or egg. What if you have a decent cycle path, you might increase the amount of cyclists, but you won't know that until you've made the cycle path. So it's a question of what do we prioritise first. But I still feel that our recommendations here are worthy to be taken forward and then worked on more in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Skipstead. And Nick, did you want to come in? You okay? Yeah. Councillor Elsie.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, and thank you, Councillor Skipstead, for those comments, and I take on board absolutely what you say. In relation to Brighton, it may interest you to know that I lived there for 20 years, so I know exactly how the cycling infrastructure works there, and you're right, although they have redefined it recently because it was creating a number of accidents because there were no defined, there were two white lines demarcating a cycle route along the seafront, but people were wandering in and out of it, which was neither safe for cyclists nor for residents, for pedestrians. I have seen, because I was there 3 weeks ago, that they have actually made change to that, and they've made it safer. The thing that I would say though is that whilst they have things along the promenade and against the green and wooden barriers which prevent people from falling over the edge, they don't have street furniture all the way up. And they don't, and the actual spaces are a lot wider than Bridge Street is, and there aren't people spilling out of shop doorways into potentially oncoming cycling traffic, and they haven't got a market on there which we are being asked to expand the size of, which takes the necessary footprint that either the cycle route or the pedestrians would need in order for everything to go safely. So I'm not saying it won't work. I'm saying there are restrictions in, and I can, I've been to Copenhagen on a number of occasions and other cities. So I get that cycling works alongside other modes of transport. I'm not convinced that Bridge Street is wide enough in order to safely facilitate both of those things, given that you don't have one side of it that you could then make the cycle route because you've got shops spilling out on both sides. So the natural tendency is for all of the pedestrians to be milling around on both sides. If you've got both sides filled with pedestrians and you've got the central bit filled with street furniture, trees and the wooden units that we're promoting for the market, I'm not convinced that there's the space there to do it safely. There must be an alternative for us to be able to get people safely, even, whether it's, reopening the passageway between Barclays Bank or whatever. There has to be a way to do it, and I would like to see it, but I just don't believe at this moment in time that there is the space along Bridge Street for that to happen safely.
Thank you, Councillor. It looks as though there's a lot of work need to be done on this still yet to make it viable. Trevor?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me? Yeah, a couple of points I just wanted to touch on in addition to Councillor Skipsteed. I think Bridge Street, like the majority of the town centre, is shared use space originally prior to the ban. And my understanding from the data, I think there's only been one cycling accident reported in the last 10 years. So there's been hundreds of thousands, probably if not millions of footfall trips made with very limited impact in terms of accidents. So perception can sort of overtake reality in terms of the actual data. We've got Long Causeway, we've got Cathedral Square, and they work very well with shared use space. I think narrowing down to cycle lanes, not necessarily is the best option here, and people mill around and get around one another just fine. With regards to the plan to reduce car use by 15%, the city centre is very, very keen to, or key to enabling that, otherwise you won't get the change of mode of transport. So I think shared use space works very well. It has worked previously. Like I said, I think there's only been one reported accident. We go on to Bridge Street, Crescent Bridge very quickly. Uniquely, as it comes onto the roundabout, there's still 2 lanes with the schematics to reduce it down to 1. And the traffic, any build-up, would only negligibly sit further back on Thorpe Road. So it actually won't impact on the amount of vehicles trying to, as capacity-wise, get onto the roundabout. There's been many vehicles that are broken down on Crescent Bridge itself. It goes down to a single lane, and it's, again, perception that probably about 15 car lengths will go further down into Thorpe Road but the actual capacity entrance onto the roundabout is kept at 2 lanes, which is very key. So the capacity won't change, it's just the length of people either sat next to one another or behind one another by about 15 car lengths. So I don't think it's as perception as worse as reality, but happy to discuss further.
Thank you, Trevor. Just before I wrap it up, shall I come to Councillor Sanford? You put your hand up.
Yeah, just very briefly in response to the points that Councillor Elsie has made, which I do think are quite refreshing, actually, that he's not rejecting what's in here. He's just saying that he needs to give it further thought. Just on the point about Bridge Street, I think if you read the detail of the report, what it says is we have identified a clear need for a north-south route because there's a lack of connectivity. Now, I think the recommendations have become a bit too emphatic that must be down Bridge Street, that there could be an alternative. It needs to be an alternative that makes it easy for cyclists to get across. I think that's the main thing. And just on the point about Crescent Bridge, I think it would be useful perhaps for officers to do a bit more work on what the traffic patterns are, because I'm aware that since COVID, there's been a massive change in the way that people work, so not as many people commute at peak hours. I think the problem with Crescent Bridge is if you're going to do as is recommended, do the implemented cycleway on Thorpe Road, then Crescent Bridge becomes a problem because it's no good getting to the end of Thorpe Road if you can't get across the bridge. So I think maybe a bit more work would be required on that.
Thank you, Councillor Sanford. Are we happy to, shall I wrap it up now, Councillor Elsie, or did you want to come back again? No, okay, all right. Well, look, there's some great initiatives, some great ideas there, and you're absolutely right. To connect the south to north, Bridge Street has to play a key part, and equally, as you just highlighted there, Councillor Sanford, about if you're going to encourage all the Long Thorpe and Thorpe to cycle in and have that bottleneck on the Crescent Bridge, that's also is going to be a problem. So for me, if we Cabinet to note the recommendation or the 12 points and for the Cabinet member to work with officers, one of the other key things which we haven't spoken about, and which is the finance side of things. How do we fund all these projects? And of course, I was at the Combined Authority meeting a few days ago, last Wednesday, I think, and they do have some money, some capital budget for active travel and a number of other transport initiatives. So there's no harm in Cabinet member, portfolio holder to approach them and get funding. And if we can get large amount of funding, then I think we could overcome all these challenges. For now, if I can then now put in a revised recommendation, please, and that is, it is recommended that Cabinet consider the final report of the Task and Finish Group, continue to work with officers to provide a comprehensive response to the report to the Scrutiny Committee. I propose that.
Lewis wants to come in.
Sorry, Lewis, did you? No. So I propose that.
Happy to second, Leader.
Sorry, you seconding that? Perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for lively debate.
You need to.
Yeah.
You just need to vote on that amended recommendation, Chair.
Just same to vote on it. Has everybody agreed to this new recommendation? Yeah, agreed? Agreed, thank you. Apologies. Right, thank you very much on that item. So do people carry on staying if they wish to? Yeah, okay, thank you. Agenda item number 6, authorisation for Milestone Infrastructure Limited to undertake construction of the active travel improvements on Thorwood, pages 35 to 38. Councillor Elsie, I think you're again presenting this.
Thank you, Leader. The Council has secured a further £2 million for the Thorwood Cycleway. This project will build a new cycleway along a section of Thorwood and Thorpe Road that will provide a safe and attractive link between Longthorpe and Therry Meadows, Thorwood Business Park and the police station and Bretton. It will also include 3 new zebra crossings and will be lowering the speed up limit to 30 miles an hour. The funding has come from Active Travel England, a government agency, via the Cambridge and Peterborough Combined Authority. The next step is to undertake some public consultation, and construction works are planned to start in April next year. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Elsie. Do we have any questions on that? Councillor Hiller.
It's thank you, Leader. It's not so much of a question, more of a statement, really, and I'm sure that Cabinet will agree. What Councillor Elsie has just announced is great news, certainly, and also a significant testament to the professionalism and expertise of our council officers who've created the bid initially. They worked alongside their colleagues in the CPCA to enable this hugely beneficial award to actually happen. So I really would ask Cabinet members to congratulate and thank our senior officers for creating the bid. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Hiller, and we all echo that. Any further questions on that? Well, in that case, if I can just move on to the recommendation, please. It is recommended that the Cabinet authorise the works order of up to £2 million to Milestone Infrastructure Limited to undertake construction of active travel improvements on Thorwood under the existing Peterborough Highways Term Services contract. Recommendation 2, authorise the Director of Place and Economy to vary the works order value when required, subject to A, available budget being in place, B, the total sum of each variation not exceeding 100,000, C, the combined value of any authorised variation or variations do not exceed the total sum of £500,000, and D, any variations are to be made in prior to consultation with internal audit, finance and legal services. Do we agree to those recommendations, Cabinet? Thank you. Thank you. Well, that item went fairly quickly. Item 7, contract award for the Peterborough Adults Advocacy Services, page 39 to 46, agenda item 7. Cabinet Member Councillor Saqib Farouk.
Thank you, Leader. Advocacy is the matching of an individual to an advocate who will promote and support the individual to have their voice heard and navigate, primarily but not limited to, the health and social care system. The advocate will promote the needs and wishes of the adult as far as possible, considering gender, age, ethnicity, disability, and preference. The individual will be included in their decision-making process, and they are satisfied that the advocate has followed the appropriate legislation and provided evidence as to how a decision has been concluded, especially if they cannot meet the person's expectation. Primarily, the service will be used by those referred by health and social care when the person has substantial difficulty in being fully involved in the process and there is no one appropriate available to support and represent the person's wishes. However, anyone who needs help to have their voices heard about their social care or mental health support can self-refer for a community advocate under the service. Voiceability has been contracted to provide this service since 2016, and this contract is now ending on the 4th of February 2024. After engagement with current service users, adult social care and specialist groups, the procurement was advertised in conjunction with Cambridgeshire County Council in July 2023. The tender closed in September 23, and the evaluation and moderation of those bids concluded in October 23. After this process, Power was the successful bidder and are recommended to be awarded the Peterborough Advocacy Service for a maximum of 4 years, ending on the 5th of February 2028, and the total contract value, should the 4-year term be completed, is £897,966.12.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions? Again, it's a straightforward statutory service by looks of things, so thank you very much. So I'll read the 2 recommendations and then we'll vote on it. It is recommended that Cabinet award a contract for the Peterborough Adult Advocacy Services to Power, registered company 033234040, following a successful procurement for a period of 3 years with the option to extend for a period of further 1 year, from 5th of February 2024 for a value of £897,966.12. Contract year 1 value of £242,880.78, and contract year 2, 3 and 4, value of £218,361.78 per annum. Recommendation 2 is authorise Peterborough City Council to enter into Section 256 agreement with the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Integrated Care Board for a contribution to costs associated with Peterborough City Council providing adults advocacy services within Peterborough for a period of 3 years, with the option to extend for a period of 1 year from 5th February 2024 for a value of £153,980.57. Contract year 1 value of 41,649.79 and contract year 2, 3, 4 and 4 value of £37,443.59 per annum. So those are the 2 recommendations. Does Cabinet agree with both of those recommendations? Agreed? Okay, thank you. So that item is straightforward. That's gone through. Item 8. Award of children and young people home and community sport block contracts and award of home and community sport pseudo-dynamic purchasing system contracts, page 47 to 104, agenda item 8. Councillor Bisbee. Sorry, I think your mic's not quite working. Not all the mics are working today for some reason.
Thank you, Leader. This report relates to statutory obligations and legal requirements that we have to provide services. And initially, this is for 3 years with 12 month extensions up to a further 2 years. You can see from all the extra reports attached to this that there's been lots of work done behind it to make sure that we have got the right services going forward, and it's been in consultation with many people. That's my report to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bisbee. Any questions on Councillor Bisbee's portfolio on those contracts? Okay, well that's a straightforward again. So there are 5 recommendations on this. As it's recorded, I'll read all of them. It is recommended that Cabinet approve the award of 3 times children, young people, home and community sport block contracts, each with a contract term of 3 years with an option to extend up to 2 years in increments of 12 months from the 1st of February 2024 as follows. To 1.1 to Circles Network, company number is written there, with a value of £50,000 per annum, £250,000 for the contract term, including extension period. 1.2 to Sabanu Care Limited, with a value of £50,000 per annum and a £250,000 contract term, including extension period. 1.3 to Green Hill Healthcare Limited, with a value of £50,000 per annum and £250,000 for the contract term, including extension period. Recommendation set 2, approve the award of the Children, Young People's Home and Community Sport Pseudo-Dynamic Purchasing System, PDPS. The contract term is 5 + 3 + 2 years and has an overall contract value of up to £10 million over the whole contract term, including 2 extension periods. The list of approved providers are outlined in Appendix 1. Recommendation 3, delegate approval to the Executive Director, Adult Social Care and Commissioning to extend the contract term up to 10 years for the PDPS in accordance with the contract provisions. Recommendation 4, delegate approval to the Executive Director, Adult Social Care and Commissioning to extend the contract term for each or any of the 3 times block contracts up to 5 years per block contract in accordance with the contract provisions. And the final recommendation is to delegate approval to the Executive Director of Adult Social Care and Commissioning to agree to an uplift per annum on the hourly rate subject to internal government arrangements and the value given in the published contract notice. Do we all agree to those recommendations, Cabinet? Thank you very much. Thank you. So now we come to agenda item 9, which is a Localities asset review, page 105 to 248. Cabinet Member Councillor Howard, would you take it from here, please?
Good afternoon, Leader. Unluckily, my microphone is working. The Localities Review is part of the Sustainable Future City Council Portfolio Board and will ultimately deliver assets that are fit for purpose and more financially sustainable, enabling them to be properly maintained in the longer term, as well as releasing assets that can either generate capital receipts or can be repurposed in some other way. It enables the Council to meet the requirements of the capital strategy, to invest in the assets that meet corporate priorities, and to dispose or repurpose those assets that don't. It must be stressed that the list has been developed and comes forwards under the previous Conservative administration, and as a new administration we are asked today to approve the next phase of the review. You may ask what difference the new administration will take on this review. Myself and the new leader will follow progress very closely. The paper will approve the continuation of the Localities Review and will allow officers working with the new administration to work on further proposals and suggestions. Locations that come under the review will be visited by our property team and communities team, and as the Cabinet member I'll be visiting some sites personally to support the work being carried out and engaging with users. At all times the needs of community groups will be considered and local ward councillors will also be kept informed. The review encompasses Peterborough City Council's community assets together with service buildings including libraries, leisure facilities, a number of green spaces, children's centres and contact centres. It seeks to deliver a smaller portfolio of locality assets together with an investment plan to ensure retained assets are fit for purpose, which will be funded wholly or in part via the disposals plan. Cabinet also asked to review and approve a refreshed community asset transfer policy which will support the implementation of the Localities Asset Review. The Localities Review has looked at 79 sites and has a proposal to repurpose up to 28 assets. It needs to be stressed that this remains a proposal and no decision has been made at this time. Following approval, officers will seek to engage more widely with the operators of the locality assets, the public and members before determining a final suite of recommendations and actions. The current proposals would deliver, over a 3-year period, a revenue saving of around £400,000 per annum, with potential capital receipts of up to £4 million and a cost avoidance on outstanding repairs of a further £3.8 million. In summary, this review will give us the chance to review the estate, engage fully with community users and ensure the best possible use of community facilities, which would include repurposing where appropriate. Spaces that are surplus to requirements will be sold, with the focus being on strengthening the remaining spaces with investment where needed. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Do we have any questions, members? No questions, and I think we're doing reasonably in time. And I know Councillor Hugg wanted to speak, but I think you want to cover that, Cecilia, anyway, are you?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the disposal lists and also the disposal plan in the MTFS update. These are plans for consideration. We're not asking members to approve that every single asset on the plan is going to be a disposal. It's just identifying those properties that will be considered for sale. The report does that make that quite clear. But it's a big report, so I think just to assure members that what you approve today is not that every single asset on the list is going to be sold.
Thank you, Cecilia. Councillor Hugg, we do have a bit of a time, so if you wanted to come in or wanted to speak.
Thank you. So, may I congratulate you on your first Cabinet meeting and those of your colleagues as well. It's nice to see a breath of fresh air in charge after 20-odd years of Conservative control.
Apologies for interruption, Councillor Hugg. My fault. You're not discussing anything from the exemption report, are you?
No, I'm not going to discuss any. I'm well aware of the exempt nature of the. So I won't be mentioning names of assets, shall we say.
It's just that if you wanted to, then we'll go into that stage, but if you're not, that's fine.
So the trouble I have is that later on in the meeting, you've got your MTFS report with the disposal list that has grown substantially since the July iteration. I've just checked. And the growth of that list is essentially community assets. We were told quite clearly at the Growth Communities Scrutiny Committee that no decisions have been made in terms of these assets. The trouble is that you have a number of community centres, the people running them, the groups that use them, and the users of the groups that use them. So quite a wide base of stakeholders. There's been a lot of speculation in the press from not just the printed press, but also TV media as well. And there's a lot of a buzz going around these community centres. We were told quite clearly that this was early days, that there were no decisions being made. We've now got this come out, and what I am saying is that we need to get the list of the units that are being looked at, not about what the direction of travel is, but the list of those items, so that basically stakeholders are able to form together to put a coherent case for why their particular community centre or community asset, be it a library or what have you, needs to be saved. What they are doing with that unit, why it's so important to them as a community. I also note that the recommendation here is that essentially, if there's any disposals that are subsequently found after the review, it will be for officers to decide whether what happens with those. It's only those that with a value of more than 500,000 in item 3 that will come back to Cabinet. I think this is important enough that when the localities review is finished, that it basically comes back to Cabinet as a whole for them to deliberate themselves and not to ask officers to do this on their behalf. And I think the other thing is that there's, when you look at the, sorry, it's the MTFS that I want to talk about that later. I'm a bit bedazzled because I was expecting to speak, and then I was expecting not to speak. So please forgive me for kind of throttling on a bit. But it's absolutely important that we engage with our communities and talk with them about these assets and find what the cases are, give them the detail. I know that there is a lot of work being gone on from the property team, and this has gone on for years. We've got a new property team in place. They've worked at pace to bring this work to us, so I absolutely thank them for that. But we do need to get onto that next part, which is actually talking to the public, talking to the users, talking to local councillors to get the best possible outcomes. I absolutely understand that our portfolio of assets has deteriorated over the last 20 years. It hasn't been looked after in the way that it should have been, and we do need to spend a considerable amount of money to bring it up to the level that it should be at. And that may well mean disposing of some assets that are quite frankly not worth saving, in order to be able to save the ones that are worth saving. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. Cecilia, did you want to just make a comment before I move on?
Yes, just to assure Councillor Hogg that communication and engagement will be undertaken, and some has already happened. It's an ongoing process, and to reiterate what I said earlier, no decisions have been made yet. These are lists for proposals, so it's nothing is set in stone yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Cecilia. Any further comments from anybody? I just wanted to say, probably reiterate what you said, Councillor Hugg, and that is, look, we've only been in this job for 8 working days now, or 9 working days, so this asset disposal list we have inherited from the last administration. But what we have to do is make best out of it, exactly like you said, Councillor Hugg, which is review each site, consult with users, repurpose where necessary, modernise facilities. It's not all about, libraries are not as just about books anymore now, it's more than that, community hubs. And where we have to dispose a site where it's not delivering, we will have to do that, but any savings we make or portion of that savings, we could then spend it in the nearby facility and make sure the residents have the best facility possible. So I'm glad you pretty much represented the view of the administration. If there's no further questions, then it is recommended that the Cabinet notes the locality asset review report contained in the exempt Appendix 1, agrees that estates and finance, following a period of engagement with the public, the operations of the sites as well as elected members and dependent upon the outcome of that engagement, looks to dispose of those locality assets highlighted in the report as being potentially suitable as surplus to requirements and for repurposing up to maximum disposal price of £500,000. This is subject to any final terms to be delegated to the Executive Director of Corporate Services and Director of Legal after consultation with a Cabinet Member for Finance and Property. Then recommendation 3 notes that where any proposed sale of an asset is in excess of £500,000, it will be brought back to Cabinet for specific approval to dispose on a case-by-case basis. Recommendation 4 notes that on a case-by-case basis, a proportion of the savings in revenue are ring-fenced to be invested in the remaining assets to support the proposals in the report. And then the final recommendation notes that on a case-by-case basis, a proportion of the capital receipts may be ring-fenced to fund the costs of sale, costs of relocation and repurposing of assets and investment into the retained portfolio. 6, note that directors will report the Growth, Resources and Community Scrutiny Committee in January with further details of the proposed locality asset review recommendation and timings following further consultation. 7, approves the draft community asset transfer policy contained in Appendix 2. Do we all agree to those recommendations, members? Agreed? Thank you. Now that brings us to item 10, medium-term financial strategy 2024 to 2027. Quarter 2 updates are on page 249 to 280. Councillor Howard, would you like to take it from here, please?
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to present the medium-term financial strategy, which our hearing call the MTFS. The aim of the MTFS is to pull together in one place all known factors affecting the financial position and financial sustainability of the Council over the medium term, over the next 3 years. The MTFS balances the financial implications of objectives and policies against constraints in resources and provides the basis for our decision making. Given funding constraints, difficult decisions may need to be made in order to achieve strategic outcomes and a robust, timely and relevant MTFS that can provide a solid foundation to use the Council's resources effectively. The MTFS position has worsened from the Q1 update. The position is now a budget pressure of 6.1 million in 24-25, 8.6 million in 25-26, and 13.8 million in 26-27. The Council shares the challenges facing households across Peterborough, rising energy costs, inflation, and looking after our adults and children. Many councils like ours are facing increased demand in children's placements, adult social care and temporary accommodation. Council officers are tackling the overspend through a cross-council transformational programme whose benefits are not yet fully included in the MTFS. The Council, however, is on track to deliver a balanced budget for 24-25. Also presented is the updated asset disposal plan, with new additions that the Council is considering disposing of, and the feedback from the budget simulator where 384 residents took part, and the feedback said they wanted to protect education and children's social care, cleansing, waste and recycling, transport and roads, and community safety and neighbourhood services. I am glad to report that other local authorities have shown interest in our budget simulator. I'd like to thank all the residents who took part in the budget simulator, and we hope in future years more residents will choose to take part, as the feedback is very valuable to shape the future direction of the Council's priorities.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Do we have any questions, members? Yeah, comment from Chief Executive.
Thank you, Leader. Just to emphasise the comment they made there around the need for transformation, we do have an improvement panel working with us at the moment, and I think it's fair to say that we are well on top of the budget at the moment, but as they would say, we're not out of the woods yet, and they're emphasising that need for further transformation over the next 2 or 3 years around those cross-cutting agendas. So there's more work we're doing as a team, which we'll be presenting to Cabinet and the Financial Sustainability Working Group in the coming few days and weeks to try and break the back of the budget in the next few weeks.
Thank you, Matt. And if there's no further questions, then I'll go on to the recommendations. It is recommended that the Cabinet notes the revised financial assumptions included within the medium-term financial strategy 2024 to 2027, Quarter 2 update as outlined within Appendix A of the report. Recommendation 2 notes the update from the budget simulator, and recommendation 3 agrees to the updated disposal plan included within the Appendix C of this report. Do we all agree? Agreed, thank you. Thank you, so that's all agreed. Yeah. So now we move on to the monitoring items. Item 11, Budget Control Report, Quarter 2, page 281 to 297, agenda item 11. Councillor Howard, are you back to you?
Thank you very much. Hopefully you're not fed up with my voice just yet. This final report, the final item of the day, is the Budgetary Control Report. This report sets out the Council's current year financial position, which compares how we are forecasting against the budget we approved at Council in February, alongside other measures of financial performance. The report sets out the position as at the end of Quarter 2. We are now projecting 6.4 million overspend for the year, and like with the MTFS report I presented earlier in the meeting, the gap in the current year has also increased because of a number of challenges which are largely outside of our control. It is a similar story for councils nationally. The key pressures driving the position is coming from a sharp rise in complexity of need and demand for children's social care placements, and the most significant key change in comparison to the last report is the rise in the number of individuals and families requiring support with housing, particularly in temporary accommodation. We are also still managing a number of budgetary risks, as outlined in section 4.4 of the report. Most of these are demand-driven or a result of the continued high rates of inflation. Mitigation plans have been developed and are being implemented, aiming to reduce these, and as you can see from this section, positive progress has been made, and some of these risks previously deemed high have now been downrated to amber. Our savings programme is progressing in the right direction with only 4% rates as high risk. At this stage, I'm confident that will be delivered by the end of the year. With that brief summary, I'm therefore happy to recommend that Cabinet notes the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Any questions on that part? No questions. I must say one of the reasons we don't seem to have questions, we've just gone through all of that things early on in the afternoon where most of the questions were answered, so that's it. In that case, it leads me to go on to the recommendations. It is recommended that the Cabinet notes 1, the budgetary control position for 2023-24 as at 30th September 2023, which outlines a forecast overspend of 6.4 million. Recommendation 2, the key variance analysis and explanations are contained in section 4.2 and Appendix A to the report. Recommendation 3, the Council's performance with respect to business rates and NDR and Council tax collection as outlined within Appendix B to the report. And final recommendation, recommendation 4, the Council's capital programme performance as outlined in section 4.6. Do we members agree to those recommendations? Agreed. Well, thank you very much. That concludes our first cabinet meeting. So thank you very much. Thank you for taking part, and thank you all the officers for hard work. The reason it was easy because you made it easy, the officers in the background. Thank you.